I do tech stuff such as Ruby on Rails, development, network, and security, and I'm starting to look more into things like cloud and OpenStack. I will be talking mostly about tech and work/business, but I'm sure things from all aspects of my life will creep into this. I can start off just by talking a bit about what I've been doing lately, and we'll see where it goes from there. So the project I've been working on is an office here in Colorado that has a few users. So they don't need a lot of infrastructure, but they do need secure, centralized authentication and firewall and just stable infrastructure and stable network environment and everything. So we installed VMware ESXi, Cisco switch, and a new Cisco next generation firewall. And all the stuff's basically installed, but there's a lot of configuration left to do and documentation, diagramming, and all that kind of stuff. I guess it's been great. It's been a good learning experience. I had problems, happen. Problems will arise, but as long as I frame them and think about them in the right way, it's usually not a big deal. I had one issue with VMware. The memory requirements seemed to be okay until I actually got going, and then I had problems with the memory requirements for VMware. VMware ESXi required 4 gigs of RAM, and the server had 4 gigs of RAM. So everything should be good except for during the install. It says I don't have enough RAM. So I have to go into the VMware files and tell it to change the amount of RAM that it's looking for, or actually the way that it's calculated, basically, for the geeks, super geeks, or network guys, or whatever that actually learn this stuff, It's like, one bit is 8 bytes is, a byte is 8 bits, and then a kilobyte is 1,024 bytes, not 1,000 bytes, and a megabyte is 1,024 kilobytes, not 1,000. It's not 1,000 times 1,000 or 1,024 times 1,000. And it was shocking that the server, the way that it was calculated on the server, what the server was reporting was not 1,024 times 1,024. It was 1,024 times 1,000. So they rounded. It's okay to round when you're talking about stuff, but you would think that somebody who's a well-known server vendor would not make that kind of a calculation rounding mistake like that. Anyways, problems will arise, but I've learned, try to take a deep, long look at how you frame the problem, how you think about it, and how you frame it, especially when communicating with the customer. Because sometimes, IT just goes wrong, and that's a standard operating, that's a baseline, that things go wrong. So I think everybody knows that, and I don't expect things to go normal in IT anymore. I had to show up on a dime this last Thursday morning, because the customer's ISP, their internet service provider, added a new block of IP addresses that we did order the IP addresses, but at some point Wednesday evening, late afternoon, they went ahead and made the cut over to the new block without, to my knowledge, any coordination, which of course their firewall they had was configured with a static IP address with a static default route, and so they were no longer configured on the proper network, and they lost connectivity. And I think they dealt with it and then left and gave it. Maybe they said we'll give it a minute or something. They'll give it till tomorrow, and then they came in the next day and they were down. And so I had. Luckily, I was already like kind of ready to go out the door and headed over there, and I tried to troubleshoot their firewall and their switch that they had, but there was I didn't have login access or any diagrams or any info or documentation. It was kind of a lost cause, and I just needed to get them back online. So I went grabbed, and luckily I had just gone to storage the day before. I had a bunch of Cisco routers and switches, and I had grabbed a switch out of storage, and it was in the trunk of my car. And then I ran over there. I had a firewall, and I just basically replaced everything. I replaced the network instead of trying to dig around. I said dig around and go, backwards. I just decided to go ahead and move forward with the Cisco stuff, and it was crazy that I had just gone to storage the day before, and the firewall was just laying around the house. I had that. It was a 5505 that I had used before for my home network, but anyway, so that worked out, and I was able to get them up and running without too much trouble once I made the call to just move forward with the new network. So yeah, so Windows Server 2012. So far, I haven't done much past the basic install, but I like it. It looks to me, and I did Windows when I was in the Navy. I was a domain administrator, Active Directory and that sort of thing. And now I've been doing it commercially again, and I like the new Windows Server 2012. The default settings, it looks like you get more done with the basic install. I don't know if anybody, just let me know what you think. Maybe it's a nightmare. I haven't started configuring it yet. Will I still like it at the finish line? So I just wanted to touch on a couple things I was talking about earlier. I know some people out there probably think, why did you use 4 gigs of RAM in this day and age? And 4 gigs is the minimum for that system that I was trying to run for VMware ESXi. And I think maybe we often overuse things or misuse things just because it's there, or we can, or we think we can. In IP addressing, IP version 4, to put simply, the world/universe ran out of public usable IP version 4 addresses. And it's kind of hard to argue against the concept that a lot of the IP addresses that were used by some of the very large organizations early on, and even until the end, were not really needed. I mean, people got these giant blocks of IP addresses, and some of them were needed. There's some big government organizations that do not use NAT at all. All of the IP addresses are public IP addresses, valid public IP addresses in some of the giant organizations that were the first organizations to ever use IP addresses. Then they came out with NAT, but even with NAT, I see it, and it's like with IP version 6, I think with IP version 4, nobody thought they would ever run out of IP addresses. And then, there's just a giant number of IP addresses. And then the internet, everybody started getting IP addresses. And then with IP version 6, it feels the same way. Like, I feel like I understand that there's this, you can get a, /64 in IPv6. And I mean, that's a ton of IP addresses, and granted, yeah, we're using more IP addresses because there's more devices and everything. So it's warranted, but you know what? Like, I just get the sense that there's still the attitude of like, oh, well, we'll never run out. And it's like, it's bizarre because like with cloud and virtualization, you can use a lot bigger, you might have a lot more hosts on a segment or subnet, but, whether they be virtual or, combination of virtual and physical. So back to, the original point. What I'm saying is whether it be CPU or RAM or IP addresses, it seems like we often just guess about things and calculate that we should need, X amount of RAM, CPU, network, or whatever. So we should buy 3 times as much. Just err on the side of caution, times 3. But I mean, to me, I don't know is that the right thing to do. I mean, like, for instance, the problem that I ran into that I was talking about earlier was, so I made an exact calculation about how much RAM was required for the install, but unfortunately the calculations didn't line up, so it took a little bit of effort to get it to work. But I mean, is that okay? If it took a little bit of effort to conserve and to try to be precise about it, what's the harm? I mean, because like maybe it's not enough. Like maybe it says it'll work, and I install the RAM, and it's like, okay, maybe I run into problems with the install, or maybe I don't run into problems with the install. It's fine, but then after the install, it's just sluggish and it just doesn't run properly because it just doesn't have enough RAM. So it's a failure. I chose wrong, and I did not get enough memory. I didn't get enough RAM. So what would be the solution to that problem? I need more RAM in the server. Well, I order more RAM. So it's not really that hard. I mean, I might have to wait, maybe order the RAM and come back, maybe get it the next day and, come back later. And, I mean, that's, work on something else and maybe keep moving or just come back the next day. I think that's just not a big problem. I mean, I can tell you, I've run into a lot of other issues, tons of other much worse issues that I would rather have the issue of running out of RAM over so many issues in my illustrious career. So I want to talk about something I don't know much about that I'm just getting into, and that's cloud computing / open networking, open stack, and that sort of thing. I envisioned being able to build apps. And I like web apps because everybody can get Chrome browser on your iPhone, your computer, your tablet. It just doesn't matter. And I know people like apps, and I like apps for my bank and certain things. There's a GPS app, like when I go off trail or hiking off trails and stuff. But for certain things, I don't want to have to install an app all the time. And then, if you change phones. So anyway, that's my preference. And I don't know if people agree or not, but so I kind of figured I would focus on browser, on just the web, because you can always, it's the one thing that it pretty much works across all devices. It may not look the same, but these days you can pretty much style it with things like Twitter Bootstrap. You can style a page where it'll be responsive and work on mobile, and you'll be able to see it without having to get a magnifying glass or resize your screen. So I envisioned being able to write apps and just program to APIs for network stuff. And I thought, just to make, dashboards for enterprises or, managers or, that sort of thing. And basically whatever. But I hadn't, I guess I was studying for CCIE, and I was just working a lot and doing a lot of after hours work, and then having a study after hours, and I just got burned out on networking. And I guess not IT in general, because during all that time, or right after I quit, right after I failed the CCIE exam for the third time, I just said I'm kind of done with networking, and then I immediately took a class and then another class in Ruby and then in Rails development. And so I haven't gotten totally burned out on like tech and IT stuff, but I was just burned on networking. And so it's really cool lately now that I've kind of taken a step back and looked away from it and rejected it. And now I'm looking at it again with fresh and open eyes, and it's pretty exciting. I mean, looking at OpenStack, I see a lot of possibilities. I'm not going to speak too much about any of it because, it's so new, and we're talking about making all these different projects come together that all these people have been working on, and technology is just getting crazy. But I'm going to give it a try. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to get started with Mininet, and just to try it and see what's going on and see what I can do. So I'll be talking and commenting, I guess, about that. And we'll see what happens.